Again, there are some simple steps, some simple intentions we're trying to achieve. We know the duty output we want. We want this machine to last 5 years trouble-free. In fact, we'd like to have a machine that over its entire service life never fails. I'm going to maintain it in a way that prevents failure, operate in a way that prevents failure, so that over the 25 years it is failure-free. Not maintenance-free, still got to look after the condition of my parts. But I've now got a way to look at the stress in my parts, come up with a design methodology to minimise that stress, build that into how I run the machine, maintain the machine, select the machine, and in theory I've now got a process that I will run for the next 25 years and produce a failure-free service life, maximum availability, least maintenance cost. That's our intention. Now the world's not perfect, so we're going to accept that things can happen, but we're trying to minimise the unknown and design something that produces the results that we're after. So we've got to an idea of how to do that. Now got to turn an idea, a concept, into practical work. Same as a movie. I write a script. I review the script. I practice the actions. I practice the play, and I refine that until I know this off by heart. Then we run that known practice and expect those known results. Everything's going to come down to a document because we have nothing else in the world yet that beats that approach. I suspect one day we're all going to have computer connections to the back of our head and then the computer will talk to our brain. They're actually working on that now. It isn't there yet and it won't be there in our lifetime, I suspect. So at least for the next few years, few decades, paper is all we've got. It's worked fine for a long time. The point is we're going to have to design that process and that will be on some document. And from that document we go into creating the business that works that way. So we're going to write specs for our equipment in terms of its maintenance, its operation. Without that, what happens is we still run the machine. We can run a machine without any documentation. We're going to learn how to run the machine by breaking the machine and fixing it. And that's a hard way to learn how to run a machine well, to break it first, then fix it and break it a couple more times till I realise, hey, that will actually break the machine. I better change my practices. We want to get past that step because in doing it that way, it's a very expensive learning process. So from what the machine's meant to perform, we're going to turn it into the activities the operations guys, the maintenance guys, the engineering guys, the project guys, the finance guys will actually do. That will come into a database. You know, the way we decide to design our processes and run them and build them will be a database. Everybody goes to the same book every time. So those documents you write are universally applicable and be easily available in a computer form. That also affects the training required. Once I know what I want to do, because if I do it right, I get this outcome. But I've got to do it right. So until we get it right, I'm going to train people and retrain people. And if it's too hard, I'm going to try and find a simpler way again and challenge guys, look, we've got our first cut pass of what we think is acceptable, but I will take your advice. If you've got a smarter way to do it, we're going to have a look at that as well. So I want my 100 guys doing it one way, with 100 brains looking for better answers. And that's part of the continuous improvement that we want to see in a company.
Who do you visualize writing these the first time? That's a good question.
Someone that knows the engineering of the machine, knows the process and what the machine's doing with that process and what the machine's changing the process to.
But don't they have to be written so that a somewhat uneducated person can follow it?
It's got to come down to that, yes. In my mind, I would imagine probably an engineering level person. Wouldn't have to be, would have to be someone that is competent in the machine's design, the machine's operation, and the process that this machine is converting things to. So it wouldn't have to be an engineer, but it has to be a person that knows what is right and what is wrong.
And they have to be instructed not to write this so only fellow engineers can understand.
Yeah. And this is why it's a refining process. Now, some engineers are going to be very technical and they're going to be absolutely right in what they put down, but it's not transferable across to the guys that will run the machine. So we're going to have a transferable solution to the lowest level guy in the business that will run that machine.
What if the customer says, well, I don't have any engineers to spare, why don't you write it? Is that a viable?
Well, bear in mind his people and his resources in his company, he might not have the technical skills, but the guys have been running the plant now for a while. I'd be working with them all the time. You'd have to have a first cut pass and say, well, look, here's what I think's happening. Or you'd go out and do some research first, work with the guys, ask them questions, have a look at their history, go back to the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, and ask, how is this meant to work? How's the design operating? So I'd be learning from what they're doing, then applying that knowledge on my first draft and go back to them and say, well, look, let's work together and refine this right down to a document you guys will use. So the final guy that gives the nod is the guy that will run with that document. Me as an engineer, I'm happy at a high level of technical input, but he will need a lower level. But it has to be right. We want a process that produces the right outcomes. And if my process is so difficult and it's so engineeringly complicated that my guy running the machine can never use that document, then I have built a bad process. Though it might meet an engineer's satisfaction, it's a bad process for the operator of that equipment. And he's got the final say. It's the only way to be sure that what we are introducing will be used. And wherever possible, we want to get the guys that are in that place right now to work with us, because they have to own that solution, because they're the only guys going to do it. I'm never going to have a manager come down and kick this guy off his machine and take over and run this machine for the next umpteen years as his job. Not a manager's role to come down and run that machine, but the operator's role for him to run these machines. So we have to have him buy in and want to do this the right way. So he's going to have to be involved in putting in the things that are correct for him to do. Bear in mind, this is like any machine. When I buy a machine, the designer has gone through a complete design process. There's been blueprints, there's been prototypes, there's been revisions, there's been model Mark 1, model Mark 2, and there's going to be continuous development of the original design. This is no different. These documents are live documents. We're looking to make things simpler and smarter. We've just got to start somewhere. Now, once I start and we run the process as it's intended, it will improve itself.